name is Maddie, and I'm going
to have a baby.
You guys were so kind in your comments last week about how my hair looked good. Thank you. I straighten it a little more in the winter because it just doesn't want to act right because of how dry it is in Missouri. But also just that I have wet hair. Why was I going to say wedding glow? Pregnancy glow. And, I have the turntables turned because my skin is awful right now. I don't know if the camera can pick up on it as well up close, but I've got some gnarly zits. Anywho, so if you're like Maddie, I'm not interested in your channel, like upkeep, housekeeping type vibe, then you can skip ahead to the medical stories. They will be ranging from least spicy to most spicy, but we will end on a positive note. However, I did want to say just a few things that I feel like I haven't been able to say the past few videos. Number one, I have had people buy things from my registry, and thank you so much. I can't think about it too long because I get a little emotional. I'm shook. I had someone buy a lot of things for my registry, like hundreds of dollars of things, and I do genuinely appreciate it. I have had people suggest maybe having like a virtual baby shower or something. I feel like I would be so lame live, you guys. Like, you guys like me, but this is like edited, matey. Like, I edit it. I edit out all my rambling and my ums and my ahs and my and my all that stuff. Whereas, really unedited matey is more like, hi, how are you kind of thing. So I don't know. I've thought about it. We have already started accumulating baby things. As you see, there is a changing table behind me, as well as a number of other things in our closet. Both things people have bought from the registry, things that we have bought for discounted price on Facebook Marketplace, and things that people have given to us for free, either in our local Buy Nothing group or just, I have friends who have had babies semi-recently who, had some stuff left over. So we are accumulating things. We are rocking. We are rolling. Regardless, though, I could not go another video without telling you guys thank you, because that is so incredibly sweet, and I am so genuinely touched. I really am. Next on the agenda for, again, housekeeping, maintenance of the channel, is I have lately been at a bit of a loss for what I'm gonna do, what the future of the channel is. Obviously, I've lost weight and stuff like that, and that was always going to be a question. Like, even if I didn't get pregnant, if I got down to my goal weight, what was I going to do next? But the thing is, I feel like even that would be fine, because you're always trying to do something. You're trying to maybe tone a little more, this and that. But being pregnant has really just kind of put a stop to a lot of the things that I used to do on my channel, because sometimes when I exercise, unfortunately, I spot, which is terrifying. So what I have been doing is just walking on my walking pad, and that would not make for a very interesting video. I may do another 10K steps video in the future, but regardless, right now what I have on the agenda is sort of financial goal type stuff, like a no spend challenge. Obviously, we just did the grocery thing, potentially maybe a meal prep type video, things like that. But if there's something you want to see from me, you would like me to try as a pregnant person, it doesn't have to be related to pregnancy, but obviously if I can't do it because I'm pregnant, then I'll put a pin in that for later, I guess. But if there is anything that you would like to see, please let me know. How did that already take so long? So admittedly, for a little bit of attention, I'm probably going to title this video something like experiences at the doctor that I've had as a plus size woman, or something of that along those lines. But the truth is, a lot of these really aren't related to my weight. I have told the story before of my fat phobic gynecologist, and I put that in quotes because I will never know if she was fat phobic. I honestly think she was just lazy, but she did the thing doctors do where she was like, it must be related to your weight, and I will not even think to address it otherwise. But I have a fair amount of medical stories in my fertility journey that I will put in the cards as I'm talking about them. That gynecologist comes to mind, the whole handling of my diagnosis for adenomyosis comes to mind, and the fact that they had that diagnosis for 2 years and nobody said anything to me, and it took a different doctor to tell me that. Yeah, nuts. Regardless, these stories don't necessarily relate to that. And like I said, we're going to start from least spicy to most spicy. And the least spicy story is the story I call the blood pressure story. Now, the blood pressure story is really more like a mini story, but basically, here's what happened. I went to the doctor, I think for like my yearly lady exam, which we'll get to that in a minute. But I went there and I had my blood pressure taken by a nurse. And so, the cuff fills up. I sit there, I do my thing, yada, yada. And she's like, "Oh, your blood pressure is really high for someone your age." And I'm like, "Oh no, okay." And I didn't go to the doctor very much. I lived most of my life with no insurance. And when I did have insurance and I had a good job out of college that provided insurance, it still took me a long time to start going to the doctor. I have been fortunate enough to use clinics like Planned Parenthood and free clinics to do my lady stuff. And I was on birth control for a long time. So I was able to do that even when I didn't have insurance. But going to the doctor or going to a regular doctor's office for my yearly PAP or my yearly exam, that was not normal for me. This may have been the first time I actually had been to a regular doctor's office for this, for my yearly exam. But yes, this woman says to me, "Your blood pressure is really high for someone your age. I'm very concerned." And so she's giving me speeches. I could not tell you how much I weighed at the time, probably less than 200 pounds. Now, it's worth noting, if you don't know this, I am 5'2". For me to be normal weight, I Googled it earlier, and I believe Google said I have to be between 104 to 131 pounds. The last time I weighed that much, I was in the 8th grade, and I weighed about 130 pounds. Now, I was 5'2" back then. I've been 5'2" for a really long time. I thought I would be taller, but it never happened for me. The point is, I say this, and it may offend some people. I'm never going to weigh 130 pounds. I have no aspirations to weigh that little. And so, I, again, couldn't tell you what I weighed, probably considered overweight for my height because that's just what I'm always going to be. But I definitely was fresh out of college and a much smaller person. I weighed about this much. I hadn't seen any other health concerns, but A, I never went to the doctor. And B, when you're young, you're not as affected by things like your weight and whatnot. And so she tells me my blood pressure's high. She's giving me speeches. She's telling me I need to lose weight. I need to eat like less red meat and this stuff, like all these things that can affect my blood pressure. She's giving me pamphlets and she turns the monitor over. I don't even think she turned it over for me to see. I think she was just pushing the little cart away. And I saw my blood pressure and it was 125 over 80. Now, granted, I was probably like 22 or 23, so in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's high for that age, maybe, or maybe not. It's not. I don't know why I'm second guessing even now, but I just remember just like I had to stifle a laugh because the way this woman was talking, you would have thought it had been like 180 over 130 or something nuts like that. But no, 125 over 180. So yeah, people are weird. I don't really, there's no moral to that story. People are weird. And make sure you get the data for yourself so you can make an educated decision on if all of that is true or not. Good times. The second story is sort of like a mini story as well. But basically, I once again was at the doctor for my yearly exam because that's the only reason I went for a long time. And they were asking me all kinds of things about like family history and stuff like that. Now, this was during the time, I don't know if anybody else, I have a lot of people from different countries that watch my videos. I got some friends out in Australia that watch my videos. In the US, or at least in my doctor's network, I don't know. Basically, they have made the decision that we only have to get pap smears every 3 years. I don't particularly care for getting a pap smear. I can't think of any woman that enjoys it. However, my mother had uterine cancer and she had to have a hysterectomy. My grandmother, I know, had to have an ovary out, but I think she also had to have a hysterectomy. Her sister had to have a hysterectomy after having her first child. And my first cousin had to have a hysterectomy again, due to uterine cancer, before she was able to have any children. And all of these women in my family had them pretty young. My mother had my sister and myself at a very young age. She had me when she was 21 and my sister when she was 17. She had to have a hysterectomy at 27. If that were me, I wouldn't be able to, I would have never had kids. I mean, I'm 31 and finally pregnant now. So I take it very seriously. And so I go for what I think is my pap smear, and they are having me like write down family history of various cancers. Lung cancer has been in my family, uterine, ovarian, PCOS runs in my family. Not that that's a cancer, but that can lead to cancer. All kinds of things. I'm marking it down, and I make a comment to the nurse, and I'm like, okay, so she's like, the doctor will be in soon for your exam. I'm like, great, can't wait. But I make a comment implying I think I'm getting a pap. And she's like, oh no, actually you're not. She's like, it'll be a vaginal exam, but it's not a pap. And I was like, what is it? And she's like, we're just going to check for some cysts and things like that. And I'm like, well, I was under the impression that I came here for a pap. And she's like, no, we only do those every 3 years now. And I'm like, well, I would like a pap. And she's like, naturally, she asked why. Like, well, why do you feel you need a pap? And I was like, I point to my paperwork that I had filled out, and I'm like, multiple women in my family, close relatives, have had uterine cancer, and they were caught on paps every single time, pap smear. And so I would like to get a pap. And this woman says to me, well, cancer isn't genetic or anything. I'm not a medical professional, but I'm pretty sure that's not true. But if you're like, Maddie, that's not true. Why? And this is literally what I said to her. Well, why'd you have me write it down? What's the purpose of gathering this data if it's not for something? And she didn't have an answer for me. And she's like, well, we weren't prepared to give you a pap today. It's going to be a medical exam. And I was like, I'm going to disagree. I asked for a pap. I thought that that's what I made with my appointment. I did end up getting a pap that day, but it was just the weirdest thing to me. And somebody can weigh in the comments. Like, I think cancer does have a genetic component. And not to say that you're guaranteed to have a certain type of cancer if your close family member had a certain type of cancer. But that same great aunt I mentioned had lung cancer and never smoked a cigarette in her life. And I've had an uncle who was actually her brother who did have lung cancer and smoked. And so like lung cancer, something I'm concerned about, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, I'm concerned. And I don't think there's anything wrong, regardless, with me insisting on a pap smear. I did get one that day. I don't know if I said that already, but pregnancy brain has knocked me on my tail. But I did get one after insisting. And actually, the nurse weirdly had more issues, but the doctor was like, yeah, that's no problem at all. We'll get that. We'll do that. And it was fine. So I really say that long, rambly story to say, please advocate for yourself no matter what. Obviously, I was fine. But, I could have easily not been fine. And I had the peace of mind once I got, the results back that I was okay. I had that peace of mind to be able to go, okay, I'm good. I'm okay. And advocate for yourselves. You're paying for it, and it's your right to. This video is depressing me a little. All right, so story numero tres. We are heading up on the spiciness. This isn't the worst though, honestly, but it's not great. If you have watched my channel for a really, really long time, then you would know that I had my wisdom teeth out in late 2023, specifically like December 28th of 2023. I had my wisdom teeth out. I'm very lucky. I only had 3 wisdom teeth, 1 on the bottom, 2 on the top. And if you've had your wisdom teeth out, you would know the top ones, there's nothing, all good in the hood. The bottom one is a bitch. So basically my bottom one was very much impacted and they wanted to get the top ones all out at the same time. I finally had dental insurance. It really wasn't causing me too many problems, but it was also just a little annoying and not my favorite to deal with. I decided to get my wisdom teeth out. I did it at the end of 2023 because I had met my deductible and it was going to be just a little cheaper. It was still about $900 because my dental insurance said that anesthesia wasn't a medical necessity. So yeah. And I didn't even get the fun laughing gas. Like, they put me under. Regardless, I go in and I've never had any kind of surgery whatsoever before. And so I'm not entirely sure what to expect. And the dentist was nice and the workers were nice. The dentist actually said a few things that were like minor, like not necessarily red flags, but like orange flags. They had a reddish hue. The first thing he said was basically how because I am in my 30s, I would heal much slower than someone in their 20s. I'm not one to get bothered about my age. I don't. I don't care. Who cares? Like, getting older is a part of life. I don't want to go back to 10 years ago. 10 years ago, Maddie was dumb. And I'm sure 10 years from now, I'm going to be like, 31-year-old Maddie was dumb. We get wiser and better with age. However, the man said it to me like 4 times, and I was 30 years old. It was strange to me. I was like, okay, I get it. I'm going to heal slower because I'm in my 30s. I'm not in my 20s anymore. He said that several times, and I'm like, okay, I'm 30 years old, but sure, whatever you say, sir. He says that, and then I also was curious because, again, I've never had any kind of surgery, let alone a dental surgery before, and I was like, okay, I imagine there's going to be some pain afterwards. And he says, yes, you should be able to cope with it with Tylenol and acetaminophen, aka ibuprofen. Uh, Ibuprofen will help with the swelling, Tylenol will help with the pain, and you can do that every 6 hours. So I'm like, okay, cool, sounds good, sounds good. I'm like, okay, is that going to be enough? Because that tooth is like really impacted, like fully in my face hole. Like, it's not a regular tooth, it's in there. And I have to be careful because I have worked in healthcare settings, and so I don't want to be perceived as drug seeking behavior. That's what they call it when people go to the ER or go to their doctor's office and they're trying to get pain medicine. And so he's very reluctant and he's like, I will give you a prescription for hydrocodone, I think. He's like, but you shouldn't need it at all. And he was very insistent and made me feel really weird about it. And I was like, okay, I shouldn't need it. Cool. Sounds good. He goes, maybe on day one, but you shouldn't need it. And it'll be a prescription for, I think, 6 to 8 pills. You should not need more than one. And I'm like, okay, yes, sir. Sounds good. So I get put under, do the surgery. I slept most of the day, even though I slept most of the day and I slept normally. And honestly, things seemed to be going okay. I was being very careful. I was being very paranoid. But for some reason, starting at about day 6, I started really struggling. I would wake up a couple of nights in a row. I would go to bed at 10. I would take the Tylenol and the acetaminophen, and like clockwork, would wake up at 4 in pain. I used hot and cold compresses, specifically, again, where that wisdom tooth was. And one day, like usually I'd be able to kind of go back to sleep after I took some medicine, kind of soothe myself. But one day I could not. So I called the dentist's office and at this point I'm just like, hey, I just want to know if this is normal for me to still be in this much pain a week later. It seemed like it was getting better and now it almost feels like it's getting worse. And the receptionist was like, let me go and talk to someone, hold on. She goes and comes back and she's like, the surgeon doesn't seem to think so he'll see you again tomorrow. And they had really annoying hours. And so she's like, well, can you make it in? And I was like, yeah, let me message my boss and I'll just get off of work early. I'll make up my time. It'll be fine. I was concerned maybe I had like dry socket. Now I wasn't in that much pain. Apparently dry socket is like no other. But the way I felt, I was worried something was wrong though. Again, it just seemed like it was getting worse, not better. And at this point, I was able to clean out where it was. I was able to excavate it. Is that the word? Basically use a syringe full of water and flush it. And when I would, like, chunks of food would come out. It was pretty gross. It was pretty gnarly. But I did a good job keeping it clean. I was, again, very worried about that. And so I go to the office. And I meet with, I don't really know what you would call it. My brain wants to call her a nurse, but I think like a dental hygienist, the assistant. I'm not sure, but she is a medical person. So I meet with her first to have that preliminary, okay, so what's going on with you? And I explain, yeah, the past few nights, like clockwork, I wake up 6 hours later in pain. And, the other day, at that point, it was the day before, I couldn't like settle down to go back to bed. It just hurt so much. And she's like typing. She's not really looking at me, which is fine. I get it. You got a job to do. She's typing and she's like, well, maybe you just so happen to be waking up and you happen to be in pain. Have you ever had someone say something to you and you're just like dumbfounded? I was just dumbfounded. I couldn't even like respond. Just like, huh? And I don't, what's the implication there? I don't even know. Just like, what a weirdly dismissive thing to say. But I didn't know how to take it. And so she's like, have you been excavating your tooth? Have you been using the syringe? Because you're at that point where you can do that. Word to the wise, don't do that as soon as you're done with surgery. They should tell you this, but you do it like, I think like 6 days later, which we were there at that point. This was like day 9. And so I was like, yes, I have. And she's like, well, a lot of people don't get in deep enough. So let's just make sure that you got in deep enough. And so she gets a cup. She does it herself. And I was really proud. There was a little bit of blood, a few little particles, but they looked like blood particles. They weren't even like food. And I'm like, awesome, rocking. I'm so glad. I'm so happy. And I'm like, I'm doing a good job. And she's like, well, the blood part's normal. I guess the surgeon will see you soon. So she leaves and and I look over and, if you've ever been to the dentist, they always have, they're TV screens. They're big monitors. They're TV monitors where they'll show you your x-ray results or, talk to you about something. And I see she's left my chart up. And this bitch put on there in her note, excavated tooth, copious amounts of food particles came out, or something like that. If I find that picture, I took a picture of it. It's teeny tiny font because I very quickly just snapped a picture of it. If I find that picture, I will throw it up on the screen. Maybe I took it the wrong way. I don't know. It's been a couple years since then. But, like, why do you feel like you can straight up lie in my chart? And at this point, I was really irritated and was like, okay, it's going to be okay, Maddie. Calm down. It's going to be fine. And I wish I could say, like, I confronted her, but I didn't. I'm sorry. I know that would be more satisfying. So then the surgeon comes in. And he takes a look to make sure, and he's like, if it were dry socket, you would know. It's a pain like no other. And I'm like, okay, fair. I'm like, I just was concerned that it wasn't getting better. The way you talked, you said it should get better with Tylenol and ibuprofen, and it's not. And he's like, well, did you take that other pain medication? And I was like, I took one on night 1, which was something he had suggested. I'm like, but no, because he kind of scared me. Like, I was vaguely like worried, like, I'm gonna get addicted to it, aren't I don't know. I felt weird about it. And again, he freaked me out, and he was like, well, good. He's like, I thought maybe you were coming in here to ask for more. And I was like, no, that's not it. I just really, at this point, I was visibly irritated because I said, I called here to ask if it was normal that I was still in pain. Had the receptionist said, yes, it's normal that you're still in pain, I would have said, okay, well, I'll just keep dealing with it. That'll be fine. All I wanted to know was if it was normal. That was all I wanted to know. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't seeking anything. But they told me it wasn't, and they told me to come in. And he's like, no, it can be normal. He's like, here's the thing. You're not in your 20s anymore. And again, he says this several times. You're not in your 20s anymore. You can't just heal up the way you used to. It takes longer for you to heal. And so basically he tells me, and I may not know what I'm talking about here because this was over a year ago, that there is something they can put in there that can help with the pain, but it may slow the healing process. And the same nurse assistant who wrote the bullshit in my chart was there and was weirdly like, well, she works, she can't come in for that. She has work by the time we close. And I was like, okay. I didn't say this, but I wanted to be like, you don't need to be worried about if I can or cannot come in. And so at this point, I'm fully ignoring her, but she's straight up like interjecting and saying she can't come in. She has work during that time. So she wouldn't even be able to make it here to do that. And I'm like, what is this exactly? And so he explains that it's something they put in there, helps with pain, slows with healing, unfortunately. But I would have to come back every few days to get another one put in or to get it looked at, something along those lines. And so I'm like, okay, all I need to know is this still normal and does everything look okay? Yes and yes, it's normal and everything looks fine. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's how you feel, I don't need the patch thing. I'll manage on my own. It'll be okay. But instantly, though, I just wanted to be like, woman, will you shut up? Honestly, neither one of them impressed me too much. But regardless, it did get better. So if you ever get your wisdom teeth out, it does get better. I will be real though, that night I did go home and I did actually take the actual painkiller that they gave me. I felt weirdly guilty about it and talked to weirdly a lot of people like, are you sure it's okay? And it was just like, yes, sleeping is the best thing for you to heal. And if you cannot sleep, you are not going to heal. And I'm like, okay, that's valid, I guess. So that is what I did. Good times. This video is already so long. Oh. I like want to have morals to the ends of these stories, like advocate for yourself and whatnot, but like half of these are just so frustrating even to relive that I'm like, I don't have a moral. I mean, I guess just, just remember why you go to the doctor's office, what you're doing there, what you're there for, and just remember to ask the right questions, even if people are obnoxious. But that's not even the worst story. The worst story happened to me while I was in college. I was 20 or 21 years old. And you ever look back at a story and you're like, 31-year-old Maddie could never? Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'd be stunned if this happened to me now, but I was stunned that it happened then. So I'm in college and I go to the clinic there that is on campus. And it was the first and only time I used this clinic because of this experience. And I get my pap done. And it's usually with your pap smear, they send the results off and you find out a couple weeks later, was everything normal. But the woman who did it, the doctor, I guess, tells me there was blood on your sample. We think something's up. We're going to look at it now under our microscope or whatever. So at this point, I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, my period's about to start. Maybe it's that. I was completely unworried and unbothered. And she comes in and she's like smiling / smirking. I try not to judge people based on what their face looks like. Sometimes I smile when I'm really uncomfortable with something. I can't explain why, I just do. But if you're a doctor and you're delivering news kind of like this, you should not be you got to work on that. You got to work on your bedside manner. And her bedside manner was shit. However, she says there was something off. And I'm like, okay, what? My brain's instantly thinking cancer because of the previous stories I've already talked about. And she's like, you have something called bacterial vaginosis. And I'm like, okay, what's that? And before she can talk, I'm like, is that like an STD or something? And she's like, technically it's not. And I'm like, okay. And she said, now you said earlier when the nurse was interviewing you that you've only had one sexual partner in the last 2 years. And I'm like, that's correct. And she goes, okay, so you're still sticking with that? What the fuck? So I'm like, yes, because I'm genuinely confused because I don't know what this thing is. I had something else when I was a teenager as well that was really similar. And I don't want to say who, but I did have a member of my family that had heard and was very judgy about it. But it also wasn't an STD or an STI. And it is worth noting, anyone who is sexually active, no matter how many people they're active with, can get an STD or an STI. I feel very strongly I'm not cool with shaming people because shit happens. Fun fact, like 80% of the world's population, maybe more, has a form of herpes, and people are so damn judgy. But regardless, she's just smirking and smiling the whole time, and like I'm in like inner turmoil, like what does this mean? What's happening? What do I have? What's going on? And so she's like, okay, well, if that's what you want to stick with saying, then that's fine. You will need to take some antibiotics. And I'm like, okay, will it go away? Because at this point, again, I don't know what it is. And she's like, yes, it'll go away. Make sure you take all of your antibiotics. Don't stop a day early. The typical things you hear when you hear antibiotics, and it'll be fine. And I go, okay, look, here's the thing. I came here for my exam for birth control. I don't know that I'm going to be able to afford to get both. Do you think I should get my antibiotics first and then birth control? And she's like, oh, you need the antibiotics just like you need that birth control. And on God, that is a direct fucking quote. You need those antibiotics just like you need that birth control. And yeah, I left. I will say, while I did not go back and confront them, there was an option for like to write down some things, and I had gone in cheery as could be. I came back the next day and was like, hey, I would like to write something in your suggestions box. And the woman who was the receptionist who had seen me the day before, we were like super pleasant with each other. You know, I was chit-chatting with her, she was chit-chatting with me. I was shaking because I went home and I Googled it. And fun fact, I guess I'm explaining this more for education purposes, but I can't express enough. It doesn't matter what I had. I could have had chlamydia. I could have had gonorrhea. There's no reason to treat anyone that way. But for those of you who are curious, bacterial vaginosis is something that is associated with people who have more sexual partners, more activity than others, but you can get it if you've never had sex before. Now, I was actually engaged, my late fiance. But again, it doesn't matter what it is because there's no reason to behave that way. Because again, I went home and I Googled it and I just was so disgusted. Like, wow, like I feel really judged. And I will say Google was not back then what it is today, because I did remember seeing things, and funnily enough, in Yahoo Answers and things, and on forums where people were being incredibly judgy about it. And so I wasn't sure what to make of it. And then finally I just went and read a medical article about it and was like, oh, it's fine. But I had never felt so gross and just judged. And by someone who works at a college clinic. Ugh. So I wrote in the suggestion box and the receptionist was like, are you okay? Because I was shaking. And I said, I'm fine. I really don't want to voice what happened out loud. Please take this seriously and take this to someone. And she was like, don't put it in the box, give it to me. I gave it to her and I said, you have a good day, and I left. And I don't know what happened, but that bitch that has stuck with me for such a long time. I had a UTI when I was a teenager and had family members be weirdly judgy about that. People are gross, man. People are really, really icky, like about responding to anything related to sexual health, sexual wellness. UTI isn't even related to sexual stuff. I mean, I guess it can be in a way. I don't want to get demonetized, but basically, you know, make sure you go to the bathroom after you sharpen pencils, ladies. But I don't know. I don't have a point there. The reason I say 31-year-old Maddie could never is because I think the next day 31-year-old Maddie would have been full on Karen and being like, I need to speak to your manager right now. But I get it. But I was deeply upset. That was not a fun experience, and probably it definitely ranks up there with I think it is honestly the worst experience I've ever had, like bedside manner wise. I've had some shitty experiences fertility wise, you know, of course, the whole lose weight, that'll fix all your problems kind of thing. But it was the overall experience of years of that kind of had led to a lot of negative feelings. That was a one and done. Yeah, no. I tell you what, at Planned Parenthood, they never judged me. Okay. All right, and the last story, as promised, is a positive one. And I feel like positive stories can often be boring, but I do think this one is interesting. I've mentioned one time, I believe, on this channel that I was married once before, and it was a random story time type of video. And I mentioned it like halfway in the middle of this. So if you guys don't know, I was married before Henry. I did have a late fiance. This is not him. We never got married. He passed away. But I was married before Henry. I don't want to get into the tea of why that ended in divorce, but regardless, see, it's really hard to tell the story without seeming like I'm talking shit. Like a lot of women in the wedding planning process of marrying this man, I took on probably 95% of it. Um, there was no volunteering of taking on tasks. Honestly, a lot of micro story. I could rant about the whole process and how horrible it was. But I used to get pretty bad back pain. Now, I will say I attribute this to the really terrible chairs at my job. And every now and then I still get that back pain. And my cure, and this is not medical advice, in fact, probably don't do this, but my cure is to have someone step on my back. And my back will pop like crazy. It'll sound like a bunch of fireworks or something going off, just da-da-da-da-da, and it fixes it. I've had people try to push on it. I've had people pick me up. I've had all kinds of things. Nothing helps except step on my back. I'm really glad I don't have that bad of back pain now because obviously I can't have anyone stepping on my back right now. But regardless, I used to have back pain. And I had a really terrible job at the time. And so every now and then I would have really bad back pain at work. And I had a few coworkers who were like, if we just go sneak off somewhere, I'll step on your back for you. My back is hurting a week before my wedding really badly. I can't twist it. I can't get it to come out. And a coworker is like, Maddie, I can tell you're in a lot of pain. Let me just step on your back. Let's go find a place and I'll go step on your back. Well, our boss overhears. She comes charging out of her office and she's like, absolutely not. No, you are not doing that. You are not doing that here, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying said boss was wrong necessarily, but yeah, regardless, she put a stop to it. No, absolutely not. So I last about an hour and I'm miserable. And I will say this boss, while I wouldn't say she was wrong for saying like, no, you can't do that in the workplace. I get that. She was extremely bitter at me for taking a lot of PTO for my honeymoon. And so she was not pleasant to me that week. And so I was not looking forward to this, but I went up to her and I was shaking and I was in tears and I said, I have to leave. I have to leave. I have to go. I'm not well. And she tells me, if you leave, I need a doctor's note. That was not a rule. That was a power trip, but that's fine. We had an employee clinic. It was only $12 to go. So I said, sure, I will get you a doctor's note. And so at this point, by the time I'm in the parking lot, I'm sobbing. And I was in pain, but at that point, it was just like the dam had burst in me. And so I'm crying. And so I managed to pull myself together. I check in. They're like, okay, the nurse prac who sees people, who kind of sees our walk-ins, can see you in a little bit. I kind of hold it together in the waiting room. I get back, they take my vitals. I'm alone for a little bit. I cry, and not just like, I'm just stoically crying, like full on, like I just was falling apart. And he comes in, and it's really obvious I've been crying. And he's like, I understand you're here for back pain. Are you okay? And I'm like, I'm okay. I'm fine. I just, and so I explained to him exactly what I just said to you. I've had chronic back pain for years. It's my upper back, kind of in between my shoulder blades. Honestly, what helps is someone stepping on it, but alas, I can't do that at work, and I couldn't take it anymore. And he says, okay, your back between your shoulder blades, that's where you're going to carry a lot of stress, right? Are you stressed? And I said to this man, I looked this man in the windows of my soul, and I said, well, I'm getting married Sunday, but that has nothing to do with this. And he kind of laughs and he goes, I think this is an anxiety response. And I denied it vehemently. I was like, no, I've had this pain for years. It's not. And he's like, I understand, but anxiety and mental health can manifest itself in physical ways. And I think it's an anxiety response. And I'm like, no. I'm like, well, then explain to me this. Explain to me how when someone steps on it, it goes away. That's not how anxiety works. I'm full on arguing with this man. And he is incredibly kind and patient. And so I ask him, I'm like, so I'm assuming you're not going to medically advise that it's okay that people step on my back? And he's like, no, I will not. And he goes, but I'll tell you some things that can help. And so he shows me some stretches. He tells me, he's like, here's some stretches, here's some things you can do with the back of your chair. Again, none of it works, but I appreciate his efforts. I appreciate him trying. And he's like, going for walks can surprisingly help, watch your posture, all these things. And then at the end of it, he says, I can't think about it because it'll make me cry. He says, prayer can help. I'll pray for you. And he said it so genuinely, and it's worth noting, I'm not religious. I'm not religious. I'm not full-blown atheist, but I'm certainly not religious. I'm rarely comforted by someone saying that they'd pray for me. And to be honest, if his only solution was, well, I'll just pray for you, I would have been infuriated, but he did give actual medical advice before that. And of course, I had been crying, for over an hour at that point. And so as soon as he said that, I was like, and he's like, and he kind of gave me like a half hug, like professional, like pat on the shoulder. And he's like, he goes, look, I know you don't think this is anxiety, but I'm going to prescribe you some anxiety medicine that you can take if you'd like. And if you need to come back in to see me, you just come back in as a walk-in and that'll be fine. And, I wish you the best of luck and I'll keep you in my thoughts. And I don't know why it touched me. It touched me so much that entire week I kept telling people that story. And I would always be like, and he said he'd pray for me. Which is so funny. But again, he was just such a genuine person and such a genuine sweetheart. And I appreciated it. I felt the care. And as you can tell from all my other medical stories, that's not the norm for me. Regardless, holy crap, was this video way too long. And I'm so sorry about that. But if you have any medical stories, definitely leave them down below. Anytime I see like a short or a reel or a TikTok or something where someone's telling a medical story, I always go to the comments to read other people's stuff. So if you have one, positive or negative, I would love to hear either one. And if you heard any of these stories and you're like, Maddie, how could you be mad about that? That's probably valid, but I was. Except the last one, in which I was happy about it and thought that was very nice. But okay, as usual, if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, because the YouTube wizards love that stuff for the growth of my channel. If you have any video suggestions, definitely let me know. Leave it down in the comments below, because like I said, I've kind of been at a little bit of a loss. Like, I know some things, but then it all feels boring, and so I just want to keep the channel entertaining and fresh, and yeah, we'll probably have some kind of postpartum weight loss journey, but that's like still 5 months from now or so, a little less now at this point, but regardless. All right, that is all I've got for you guys today. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.